Hello everyone, welcome to Mind Podcast Buddhism. Today, we will delve into the profound journey of enlightenment undertaken by the Buddha. We will explore the historical context of the Buddha's life, the significant stages of his spiritual practice, and the profound realizations that led him to attain supreme perfect enlightenment. Join us as we uncover the wisdom and teachings that continue to inspire millions around the world. The historical Buddha. According to history, Buddha Shakyamuni was a real figure in the cultural history of humanity. His life has been documented from his birth to his growth. Today in India and Nepal, there are still relics of where the Buddha was born, where he attained enlightenment, where he delivered his first sermon to the 5 ascetics, and where he entered nirvana. These places still have stone pillars erected by King Ashoka, who lived about 300 years after the Buddha, guided by the 4th patriarch, Upagupta. The king erected these pillars to detail the Buddha's life, so that future generations would know that a great enlightened one had appeared in the world, bringing the light of compassion and wisdom to illuminate even the darkest corners, helping people live equally and happily with less suffering. Buddha Shakyamuni was originally a prince, the son of King Suddhodana and Queen Maya. Queen Maya passed away 7 days after the prince's birth. Queen Maya's sister, Mahapanchapati Gautami, took on the responsibility of raising the prince until he grew up. During his youth, he was named Siddhartha of the Gautama clan. At 16, he married Princess Yasodhara, and at 29, he had a son named Rahula. After attaining enlightenment, he was called Gautama Buddha. His disciples referred to him as the world-honored one, while others called him Gautama or Shakyamuni, meaning the sage of the Shakya clan. He was also honored with 10 titles, including Tathagata, worthy of offerings, perfectly enlightened one, possessed of wisdom and conduct, well gone, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader, trainer of persons, teacher of gods and humans, Buddha, and world-honored one. The Buddha was born in 624 BCE in Lumbini, Nepal, and entered nirvana in 544 BCE in Kushinagar, India, at the age of 80. When the prince was born, King Suddhodana invited many soothsayers to predict his future. Among them, a Brahmin named Kondana predicted that the prince would either become a great king or renounce the world to become a great enlightened one. The sage Asita, who lived in the Himalayas, also visited the prince and made a similar prediction. When Asita finished examining the prince, he smiled and then cried. King Suddhodana, seeing this unusual behavior, asked why. Asita explained that he smiled because he was happy to know that a great enlightened one would be born in this world, but he cried because he knew he was too old to live to see that day and learn the Buddha's teachings. King Suddhodana was worried after hearing these predictions. He did not want the prince to become a monk, even if it meant achieving supreme enlightenment. The king wanted to train the prince to be a great ruler, continuing the prestigious lineage of the Shakya clan. To achieve his goal, the king invited the best teachers in the country to the palace to train the prince in literature, arts, and martial arts. The prince excelled in all subjects, which pleased the king. However, the king was still anxious that the prince might leave the palace, as predicted by the Brahmins. To prevent this, the king surrounded the prince with pleasures in the palace and prohibited him from being exposed to the outside world, fearing that if the prince saw the suffering of the people, he would decide to become a monk. At 16, King Suddhodana married the prince to Princess Yasodhara, hoping that the prince's love for the beautiful princess would keep him from thinking about renunciation. Later, the Buddha recounted to his disciples, "My father built 3 palaces for me, one for the summer, one for the rainy season, and one for the winter, and all day long palace maidens sang and danced." Clearly, the king wanted the prince to become accustomed to indulgence and not think about renunciation. At 29, the prince had his first child, a son named Rahula. The prince asked King Suddhodana for permission to go outside the palace. The king, thinking that the prince now had a wife and child, a happy family life, wealth, and power awaiting him, consented. However, the king also ordered that the roads the prince would travel be decorated beautifully, and that only healthy and wealthy people be allowed to greet and praise the prince. Prince Siddhartha ventured outside the palace for the first time and continued to do so until his 4th trip. Each time he returned, he was preoccupied with what he had seen. These 4 encounters were: 1. An old person, with wrinkled skin, white hair, bent back, weak eyesight, and unsteady gait. 2. A sick person, someone lacking health, looking frail and in pain, no longer youthful, suffering from illness. 3. A dead person, someone who had lost all consciousness. The body would swell and rot if left unattended, thus quickly taken to the cremation ground, turning to ashes and disappearing from sight. 4. A monk, someone living a life of alms, having left home to find a way to escape the cycle of old age, sickness, and death. The process of Buddhist practice of the Buddha. The first awakening, renouncing the world to seek the path. After several outings from the palace, the prince realized the inevitability of birth, old age, sickness, and death. The objective laws that no one could escape, akin to 4 enormous Mount Merus gradually advancing towards the small human standing in the middle. People are under a death sentence without knowing it, living day by day, sometimes healthy, sometimes sick, growing old, and eventually dying, or they know the grim outlook of a human life but cannot resist and must accept it. From a young age, the prince was very introspective, preferring solitude. Confronted with old age, sickness, and death, the prince lost all desire for the deceptive, luxurious life, constantly reflecting on these phenomena. The prince often pondered, "My mother died when I was young. My father will die. My aunt will die. The beautiful Princess Yasodhara, whom I love, will die. My beloved newborn son Rahula will die. All the people of Kosala will die. And even I will grow old, fall sick, and die. After death, where does one go? How can one escape these terrifying mountains?" No one could explain this to him, and no one had an answer. Eventually, the image and words of the monk the prince had encountered outside the city became the final catalyst that pushed the prince to decide to abandon his affluent life and the throne awaiting him, to cut ties with his beloved wife and newborn son, and to embark on a quest to find a way to escape birth, old age, sickness, and death, to save himself and all sentient beings. Resolute in leaving the Golden Palace to seek the path, one night the prince and his attendant Channa, riding the horse Kanthaka, sped out of the city. Reaching the Anoma River, the prince exchanged his royal garments with Channa, took a sword to cut his hair, removed all jewelry, and handed it to Channa, instructing him to bring it back to his aunt and tell his parents and family that he would return once he attained enlightenment and freed himself from the cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death. This was the first awakening of a great superhuman. We call him a great superhuman because he was a prince excelling in both literature and martial arts, with everything at his disposal, a vibrant youth ahead of him, a throne many desired, and an entire nation in his hands. Yet he decided to abandon it all to live a life without a home, seeking alms for daily meals. During that time and even now, no other prince has shown such courage. The second awakening, the importance of the Dharma over the teacher. Now we temporarily change the way we address him. In the scriptures of that time, he was called the ascetic Gautama. We can also call him Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva refers to those who cultivate to attain Buddhahood, like Avalokiteshvara, Mahastamaprapta, Manjushri, and Samantabhadra. A bodhisattva also indicates those who cultivate with the vow to save themselves and others. For example, a layperson who always helps others without discrimination is revered as a bodhisattva. Hence, calling him bodhisattva or ascetic during this period is appropriate, since he was still practicing and had renounced his title as Prince Siddhartha. Returning to his quest to find a teacher, ascetic Gautama. The first teacher was Alara Kalama. Bodhisattva went into the forest to seek a teacher. He first met a teacher with many disciples named Alara Kalama. This teacher taught yoga meditation up to the 3rd level, the realm of nothingness. In a short time of dedicated practice, ascetic Gautama attained this state. He then asked his teacher if there was anything more to learn. The scriptures record that Alara Kalama was very pleased with his achievement, but, unfortunately, had nothing higher to teach. So he invited him to stay and guide the disciples together, but he declined and left in search of further knowledge. The second teacher was Udaka Ramaputa. Following Alara Kalama's direction, Bodhisattva found another renowned teacher, Udaka Ramaputa, who taught the 4th level of yoga meditation, the realm of neither perception nor non-perception. Again, in a short time, Bodhisattva attained this state. In this state, there is no perception, nor is there non-perception. The mind becomes deeply tranquil, making it hard to discern if there is any mind at all. This was the highest meditation at that time. Although he mastered this level, he still did not find the supreme wisdom and nirvana he sought, so he left this teacher as well, despite being invited to stay and guide the disciples. This was the second awakening. In the pursuit of spiritual practice, the Dharma is more important than the teacher. If the teacher cannot provide the Dharma that meets the aspirant's goals, it is respectful but necessary to leave and seek the Dharma elsewhere. This principle led to the Buddha's later teachings on the four reliances. 1. Rely on the Dharma, not on individuals. 2. Rely on the meaning, not on the words. 3. Rely on the definitive meaning, not the provisional meaning. 4. Rely on wisdom, not on consciousness. The third awakening, the middle way, neither indulgence nor asceticism. Bodhisattva Gautama left the second teacher and wandered into the forest of Dungsiri, a dense jungle that appeared cool from afar but was infested with mosquitoes and thorny underbrush. Here he saw many ascetics practicing severe austerities, some rolling on thorns, others hanging upside down from trees, covered in mud and ash, some with matted hair, and others beating themselves until blood flowed. Bodhisattva Gautama encountered 5 ascetics, including Kundana, who had previously predicted his great future. He joined them and practiced severe austerities with them. The scriptures describe him as the foremost in ascetic practices, enduring extreme self-mortification. He went deep into the forest, lived in solitude, did not bathe for months, slept on thorns, endured freezing winters and scorching summers, ate only a few sesame seeds or drops of dew each day, until he was emaciated and near death. At one point, the deities spoke about him, saying, "Feed him celestial food through his pores to keep him alive. He is not dead, he is practicing severe austerities." Upon hearing this, Bodhisattva abandoned his intention of fasting to death. Later, the Buddha recounted to his disciples, "My limbs became like dry sticks. My eyes sank deep into their sockets. My scalp shriveled and became like a withered gourd. If I thought of touching my belly, I would grab my spine. My belly skin clung to my back. If I needed to relieve myself, I would collapse face down on the ground. When I massaged my limbs, the hair, rotted at the roots, fell off my body." Great Lion's Roar Sutra, Middle-Length Discourses, Nikaya. The fourth awakening, choosing the breath and the environment for practice. Bodhisattva Gautama decided to abandon extreme asceticism and adopted a middle way, realizing that self-mortification did not lead to enlightenment and nearly cost him his life. He recalled his childhood experience of spontaneous meditation under a rose apple tree during a plowing festival, where he experienced profound joy and tranquility. He decided to follow this method of mindful breathing again. In the banyan forest, Sujata, a wealthy girl who had prayed for a child, attributed her son's birth to a deity residing in the banyan tree. She prepared a special milk rice offering and sent her maid, Puna, to find the deity. Puna found the emaciated bodhisattva and believed he was the deity. Sujata offered him the milk rice, which restored his health, enabling him to continue his practice. Bodhisattva Gautama realized the banyan forest was too frequented by people seeking blessings, so he crossed the Niranjana River to the Pitpala forest, later known as the Bodhi tree. He chose a large tree with wide branches for shelter and laid down 2 bundles of kusa grass offered by a young man. Sitting on the grass, he vowed, "Even if my flesh and blood dry up, leaving only skin and bones, I will not leave this place until I attain supreme enlightenment." The Buddha's experience teaches that in meditation, it is crucial to have the right method, adequate nourishment, determination, and a quiet, secluded environment, cutting off worldly distractions and views to focus on spiritual cultivation. The process of enlightenment. We can temporarily divide the Buddha's enlightenment process into 2 stages. First stage, during 4 weeks of meditation under the Pitpala, Bodhi tree, the Buddha attained the 3 insights: the knowledge of past lives, the divine eye, and the extinction of all mental defilements. He solved the problem of liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and realized the 4 noble truths: suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. He proposed the Eightfold Path as a way to achieve nirvana and end suffering, which includes right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This complete enlightenment process is termed abhisamaya in Pali. Second stage, in the seventh week, the Buddha realized the true nature, tathata, the unchanging nature, avadathata, the undifferentiated nature, anatatha, the dependent origination, idapakaya, the nature of emptiness, illusion, and the equality of all phenomena. Through his spiritual practice, he realized unprecedented truths which remain relevant today. At this point, he truly attained the supreme perfect enlightenment, anuttara-sammasambodhi, becoming a historical Buddha. 4 stages of the Buddha's meditation. We can temporarily divide the 4 weeks of the Buddha's meditation into 4 stages, but in reality this is a continuous mental process throughout the 4 weeks, from when the Buddha began sitting under the pipala tree. First stage of meditation, first jhana. Meditation with thought and examination. The Buddha began practicing the method of breathing, which he himself discovered, called anapanasati samadhi. Articulate mental recitation. I know I am inhaling. I know I am exhaling. The focus is on the mindfulness with words. The effect of this step is to cut off the mental habit of silent internal monologue from the mind base, mind consciousness, and intelligence. The Buddha's mind began to be tranquil, and joy arose. The key in this step is that the silent recitation must be linked with mindful awareness. The Buddha remained in this stage of meditation for 1 week. We need to remember that a week at that time was not necessarily the same as a week of 7 days as we know it today. The Buddha called this stage of meditation, meditation with thought and examination. Vitakar, Pali, means silent internal monologue. Vikara, Pali, means silent internal dialogue. Here, when applying silent recitation with a single content and linked with mindful awareness, distracting thoughts, vikara, from memory areas do not arise, causing the mental habit of internal dialogue to gradually subside, and the mind begins to become pure. Later, the Buddha described this stage as follows. I have detached myself from sensual desires and unwholesome states, and I have attained and abided in the first jhana, a state of joy and happiness born of detachment, accompanied by thought and examination. Joy and happiness arose in me, but they did not dominate my mind. Majjhima Nikaya, Mahasakaka Sutta, number 36. Scientific explanation. Silence stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system to secrete the biochemical acetylcholine, which lightens the body, relief, and dopamine, which makes the mind happy and joyful, joy and happiness. The essence of this stage of meditation is that when one breathes, one still mentally recites and maintains mindful awareness. Inhaling, aware of inhaling. Exhaling, aware of exhaling. This mindful awareness with words is the initial practice led by awakened intelligence, so it is called mindfulness. Second stage of meditation. Second jhana, meditation without thought and examination. With the experience of the first stage of meditation, the Buddha felt joy permeating his whole body and inner tranquility. He realized that this result was largely due to detachment from sensual desires and unwholesome states. He moved to the second stage by ceasing the silent internal monologue and only maintaining mindful awareness, aware of inhaling, aware of exhaling. The breath continues naturally. He only maintains clear mindful awareness of the inhalation and exhalation. He does not use mind consciousness or intelligence to observe, follow, or control the breath. He attained the second stage of meditation, which in the scriptures is called meditation without thought and examination. The Buddha abided in this stage of meditation for 1 week. In this stage, all awareness of the breath, whether coarse, fine, long, short, shallow, or deep. The practitioner is clearly aware, but aware without silent internal monologue about the awareness, only silent recognition. This method is also called empty attention or empty observation, in which there is no subject of knowing, only the recognition of inhaling and exhaling. In this way, his mind became clear, tranquil, and aware of the body's sensations. Joy permeated his whole body. The Buddha described eliminating thought and examination, attaining and abiding in the second jhana, a state of joy and happiness born of concentration, without thought and examination, inner tranquility and one-pointedness. Joy and happiness arose in me, but they did not dominate my mind. Majjhima Nikaya, Mahasakaka Sutta, third stage of meditation, third jhana. Meditation detached from joy, abiding in equanimity, or right mindfulness and clear awareness. In the third week, the Buddha recognized the arising of joy but did not indulge in it, abiding in inner tranquility and equanimity. This stage of meditation is called detached from joy, abiding in equanimity, or right mindfulness and clear awareness, sati sampajana, meaning clearly and fully aware of the entire surrounding environment and inner mind, but without attachment. In this stage, his mind had become a firm power of awareness. Although joy permeated his whole body, his mind was not dominated by it. He felt inner tranquility permeating his entire body. At this time, mental formations, sensation and perception, were completely still, and no conceptual thoughts arose. Sensation and perception did not disturb him. The Buddha also abided in the third stage of meditation for 1 week. The Buddha described, detached from joy, abiding in equanimity, right mindfulness and clear awareness, feeling tranquility in the body, attaining and abiding in the third jhana. Tranquility arose in me, but it did not dominate my mind. Fourth stage of meditation, fourth jhana, imperturbable meditation. In this stage, the state of silent awareness that the Buddha had attained in the third jhana gradually became non-verbal recognition. His mind entered an imperturbable state. Even the subtle attachment to tranquility, equanimity, faded away. His inner mind was in deep tranquility. Consciousness was undisturbed. The power of non-verbal recognition became increasingly clear. He immersed himself deeply in objectless concentration. The breath entered a state of spontaneous cessation called quiescence. The Buddha described letting go of joy and suffering, eliminating the previous happiness and sadness, attaining and abiding in the fourth jhana, a state of neither suffering nor happiness, with pure equanimity and mindfulness. This stage of meditation is called imperturbable meditation, or threefold imperturbability, meaning non-perturbation of verbal formation, mental formation, and physical formation. Non-perturbation of verbal formation, ceasing thought and examination, meaning ceasing internal monologue, achieved in the second stage of meditation. Non-perturbation of mental formation. Mental formation is caused by sensation, leading to perception. When sensation and perception are still, the mind is completely unattached, then mental formation is non-perturbing. This is the result of the third stage of meditation. Non-perturbation of physical formation. In the fourth stage of meditation, the breath spontaneously ceases periodically, quiescence, so it is called non-perturbation of physical formation. The Buddha abided in this stage of meditation for 1 week. First stage, attainment of 3 insights. Attainment, abhisamaya, complete enlightenment. On the final day of the 4th week, in the deeply tranquil, imperturbable state of the 4th jhana, 3 wisdoms or 3 insights sequentially became clear in the Buddha's mind like reflections of all things on a clean, dust-free mirror. The light of enlightenment shone in his pure mind. The Buddha said, with a mind concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, free from defilements, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed my mind to the knowledge of recollecting past lives. This state of mind is called the mind of suchness or mind tathata, a mind entirely tranquil, serene, unattached, only with clear awareness. The first insight is the knowledge of past lives, the clear understanding of countless past lives of himself, from general outlines to details and the conditions leading to the present life. The Buddha attained the knowledge of past lives in the first watch of the night. The second insight is the divine eye. The Buddha saw the relationship of cause and effect, the karma of sentient beings. Sentient beings die here and are reborn elsewhere in the 6 realms. They experience happiness or suffering, wealth or poverty, long life or short life, beauty or deformity. In this life, due to good or bad karma created in previous lives. Thus, the Buddha attained the divine eye in the second watch of the night. The third insight is the extinction of mental defilements. In the third watch of the night, the Buddha realized the answer to his quest for enlightenment. The question was, why do people have to be born to experience birth, aging, sickness, and death? The answer, the root cause, is mental defilements. So what are mental defilements? Mental defilements are the passions, addictions, pleasures, and desires that one cannot give up, mostly bad habits including greed, hatred, and delusion. These are accumulated from many past lives and cling to us until this life. Mental defilements have been, are, and will continue to influence our actions, thoughts, and words. Mental defilements pollute our minds. Mental defilements are the root cause of suffering and the cycle of birth and death. Next, the Buddha realized the Four Noble Truths that everyone must face. These are the truths about suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering, collectively known as the Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path. The Buddha said, "I truly knew this is suffering, mental defilements. This is the cause of suffering, mental defilements. This is the cessation of suffering, mental defilements. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering, mental defilements." By attaining the extinction of mental defilements, the Buddha completely liberated himself, free from mental defilements, and no longer subject to rebirth in any realm. He said, "Through such knowledge, my mind was liberated from the defilements of sensual desire, from the defilements of becoming, from the defilements of ignorance. I realized I am liberated. I knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more returning to any state of being." This enlightenment is called complete enlightenment, in Pali Abhisamaya. At this time, the Buddha attained the state of an arahant, ending the cycle of rebirth and mental defilements. Second stage, realization of the nature of Dharma and the Dharma realm attainment. Anuttara Sammasambodhi, supreme perfect enlightenment. After attaining the three insights, the Buddha remained under the Pipala tree for 7 more weeks to contemplate the Dharma he had realized. He viewed the world of phenomena with the mind of suchness and saw the nature of the world of phenomena, realizing the nature of Dharma and the nature of the Dharma realm, attaining supreme perfect enlightenment. In Pali, this is Anuttara Sammasambodhi, becoming the Buddha. In the 7th week, still in the state of the mind of suchness, the Buddha observed the external world of phenomena with the eyes of enlightenment. The first thing he noticed was that the external appearance of the world of phenomena was all unchanging, tranquil, eternal, and unaltered. From the mind of suchness, looking at the world of phenomena, he recognized the state of suchness of all things, hence called tathata. Tathata's true suchness is thus. The external appearance of the world of phenomena is thus. Next, he looked deeply into each object, the world of phenomena, and saw that no object was like any other. This means each object is different from another. For example, regarding humans, although all are humans with eyes, ears, noses, standing on 2 legs, speaking human language, no one is exactly like another. Similarly, no cat is exactly like another cat, no tree is exactly like another tree, or no rose is exactly like another rose. This phenomenon is called idapakayata. Idapakayata translates as the conditional nature, meaning specific conditions. Each phenomenon present in this world is formed by many conditions coming together, so it is different. Because it is formed by many conditions coming together, it is impermanent. And because it is impermanent, it is not substantial, not self-existent, so it is non-self. Thus, the 2 realizations of the Buddha were completely opposite. The world of phenomena has 2 different aspects. 1. Tathata, eternal, unchanging, undivided, classified as the nature of the Dharma realm, which is non-conditioned Dharma. 2. Idapakayata, impermanent, changing, different at every moment, classified as the nature of Dharma, which is conditioned Dharma. One view of human existence. The Buddha then observed the process of human reincarnation through the 12 links of dependent origination, also known as the 12 links. Ignorance gives rise to volitional formations. Volitional formations give rise to consciousness. Consciousness gives rise to name and form. Name and form gives rise to the 6 sense bases. The 6 sense bases give rise to contact. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling gives rise to craving. Craving gives rise to clinging. Clinging gives rise to becoming. Becoming gives rise to birth. Birth gives rise to aging and death. Aging and death give rise to ignorance. Ignorance and volitional formations are from the past life. From consciousness to becoming are from the present life. Birth, aging, and death are from the future life. These 12 links are an endless chain of cause and effect, extending indefinitely. This chain forms the wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth and death. Each stage undergoes change to transition to the next stage. Humans undergo the cycle of birth, aging, sickness, death. The wheel of samsara, formed by the 12 links of dependent origination, follows the principle of dependent origination, meaning cause and effect. For example, ignorance is the cause giving rise to volitional formations. Volitional formations are the cause giving rise to consciousness. Consciousness is the cause giving rise to name and form, and so on. This is observing in a forward direction. Observing in reverse, ignorance ceases, then volitional formations cease. Volitional formations cease, then consciousness ceases. Consciousness ceases, then name and form ceases, and so on. If one link ceases, the cycle of birth and death ends. From this, the Buddha established the law of cause and effect. Observing in the forward direction, this exists because that exists. This arises because that arises. Observing in reverse, this does not exist because that does not exist. This ceases because that ceases. The law or principle of cause and effect regarding the formation of human existence does not change. It governs humans and the world of phenomena, hence called truth. In Buddhism, there are two terms: cause, hedu, and condition, bakaya. Sometimes it is cause, sometimes it is condition. Cause becomes effect, effect becomes cause. For example, a seed is a cause, a tree is an effect, but the tree is also a cause to produce fruit, which is an effect. The fruit contains seeds. The seed in this fruit, now an effect produced from the cause, which is the tree. The conditions here are soil, water, fertilizer, sunlight. 2. View of the universe. The essence of the universe is always changing, sometimes existing, sometimes not, called the law of change, or the nature of emptiness of the world of phenomena. From this, the Buddha explained that all phenomena in the world are constantly changing, hence they are impermanent. If one does not accept impermanence, there is conflict, and where there is conflict, there is suffering. The essence of humans in the world of phenomena is non-self, because the world of phenomena and humans are not substantial, not fixed, do not have a solid core to stand independently. These three characteristics are called the three marks of existence. The Buddha realized that humans or the universe are constantly changing every moment, only temporarily aggregated, not substantial, hence their essence is empty, empty. Saying empty does not mean denying the existence of the world of phenomena, because the senses perceive their existence, but this existence changes into something else, so it is only illusory, temporarily existing. Hence, the Buddha also realized the illusory nature of the world of phenomena. In other words, humans in the world of phenomena exist in one moment. In the next moment they change, so this existence is only like magic. In summary, the essence of the universe is always changing, sometimes existing, sometimes not, due to the law of change, called the nature of emptiness. The universe changes according to the cycle: birth, duration, decay, destruction, becoming something else. The Buddha, in the state of the mind of suchness, realized that the external appearance of all phenomena in the world is only thus, just thus. The state of thusness is entirely calm, unmoving. Observing from afar, he realized that all are thus. This is the true suchness of the world of phenomena. Because all are thus, true suchness is equal. Therefore, the world of phenomena has the nature of equality. All people, objects, and scenes are thus equal. Only in the mind of suchness can one realize this equality. In summary, in the seventh week, the Buddha realized the law of dependent origination and the nature of dependent origination, recognized that humans and all things exist due to sufficient causes and conditions, and cease when the conditions are not sufficient, not due to any deity or God's intervention. Humans undergo the cycle of birth and death in the 6 realms of heaven: human, asura, animal, hungry ghost, or hell, due to their own creation. Creating karma, one must be reborn to repay karma, not by divine arrangement, not blaming fate. Therefore, humans are the masters of their own karma. With the wisdom of Prajna, the Buddha realized the origin of humans. Buddhism has liberated humans from the slavery of gods, from blind faith. The life of humans or the universe, observed objectively, is like a river, sometimes deep, sometimes shallow, sometimes clear, sometimes muddy. The river of the universe has no beginning and no end, never ceases. Ending one life is the beginning of another life in a different form, sometimes as a human, sometimes as an animal. Like a tree falling down, being sawed into planks, the planks are made into tables, chairs. This is the continuous life of humans, animals, or phenomena. Although they undergo the cycle of birth, duration, decay, destruction, they become something else, just changing forms. In conclusion, in the 7th week after realizing the nature of suchness and the law of dependent origination through the state of the mind of suchness, realizing the nature of the Dharma realm, essence of the world of phenomena, and the nature of Dharma, essence of the world of phenomena, recognizing the characteristics of the universe and humans, the Buddha became the fully enlightened one, attaining supreme perfect enlightenment, Anuttara Samma Sambodhi, being honored as the Buddha, the only historical Buddha in Buddhism, meaning the real Buddha. The other Buddhas are mythical Buddhas, not recorded in history or introduced by Shakyamuni Buddha. Later, when teaching the Dharma, the Buddha denied the role of gods in human life, meaning there is no creator or God. Humans exist due to sufficient causes and conditions. When not sufficient, they cease and become something else. There is nothing eternal and unchanging in humans called self or eternal soul. Humans are non-self, anatta, because they change over time. The life of humans is the law of cause and effect, nothing more. Cause and effect are related, but effect is not cause. Cause is not effect. So this life and the next are not the same but not different. There is a condition between cause and effect. Hello everyone. Welcome to Mind Podcast Buddhism. Today, we will talk about the topic, practicing asceticism. What does it mean? Join us as we delve into the meaning and significance of ascetic practices in Buddhism, exploring their purpose and how they help in purifying the mind and reducing defilements. Practicing asceticism. What does it mean? Today, we begin to study and discuss ascetic practices, known as Dhutanga methods. These practices are presented here because they help us further purify and reduce our defilements. First and foremost, we need purification or moral discipline. Additionally, we need to practice some of these ascetic methods to at least minimize our defilements. In this chapter, 13 Dhutanga practices are presented. According to the texts, these 13 practices were permitted by the Buddha. They are mentioned in both the Vinaya Pitaka, the monastic disciplinary texts, and the Sutta Pitaka, the discourses. These practices are not precepts. We practice them not as precepts but as supplementary or additional practices. There are 13 practices in total, listed as follows. 1. The practice of wearing cast-off rags. 2. The practice of using only 3 robes. 3. The practice of alms gathering. 4. The practice of gathering alms from each house in turn. 5. The practice of eating only 1 meal a day. 6. The practice of eating from the alms bowl. 7. The practice of not accepting food after mealtime. 8. The practice of dwelling in the forest. 9. The practice of dwelling at the foot of a tree. 10. The practice of dwelling in the open air. 11. The practice of dwelling in a cemetery. 12. The practice of dwelling in any available lodging. 13. The practice of not lying down. In the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, the meanings of the names of these practices are explained first, followed by the explanations of the practices themselves. The explanations of the names mostly relate to the Pai language, so the translations might seem somewhat awkward or literal. The first practice, wearing cast-off rags. In the past, before the Buddha allowed monks to wear robes offered by lay people, monks had to collect discarded cloth to make their robes. They would go to places like rubbish heaps or cemeteries and collect pieces of cloth that had been thrown away. They would then clean and sew these pieces together to make a robe. This is how monks obtained their robes before the Buddha permitted robes to be offered by lay people. Actually, the Buddha did not refuse the offering of robes to monks by lay people. It was simply that the opportunity had not arisen yet. One day, the physician Javaka had 2 very good pieces of cloth. He approached the Buddha and requested him to accept these pieces of cloth. He then requested the Buddha to allow monks to accept robes offered by lay people. From that time on, monks were permitted to either accept robes offered by lay people or collect discarded cloth to make their robes. The first Dhutanga practice is called the practice of wearing cast-off rags. This means that if a monk undertakes this practice, he must not accept robes offered by lay people. Instead, he must collect materials to make his own robe. In this text, in paragraph 15, it is stated that there are 23 sources of materials that can be used to make a robe. The first type is cloth from a cemetery, and the second type is cloth from a shop, and so on. These sources are described in the Visuddhimagga. The 23 types are sources of materials for making robes for monks in general, as well as for those practicing this Dhutanga. After explaining the 23 sources of materials for making robes, the author explains the practice itself. Let's look at paragraph 19. A robe that is offered by saying, "We offer this robe to the Sangha," or that is obtained by asking for it, is not considered a cast-off rag robe. Sometimes people offer robes to the Sangha, to the community of monks, rather than to individual monks. When there are enough robes, they are distributed among the monks. A robe offered to the Sangha and received by a monk practicing this Dhutanga is not considered a cast-off rag robe. The monk must not use such a robe received as a share from the Sangha. Suppose there are 10 monks living in a monastery and there are 10 robes. One of the monks will distribute the robes to the others. The best robe will go to the monk with the highest seniority. Sometimes monks go around asking for robes instead of food. Normally we go on alms rounds every morning, carrying our bowls into the village or town to receive or ask for food. But here, the monks ask for cloth instead of food. Robes received in any of these ways are not considered cast-off rag robes. In the 23 types of materials for making robes, there is one type mentioned as robes from another monk. This means robes offered by one monk to another monk practicing this Dhutanga. For this case, we need to know a few things. In this paragraph, around the second sentence, Vijnanamoli misinterpreted some Pali words. I will explain this not according to his translation. A monk is allowed to offer a robe to another monk practicing this Dhutanga. However, if a monk who is not practicing this Dhutanga offers a robe to monks who are practicing it, and if the offering is based on or due to the seniority of those practicing monks, then that robe is not considered a cast-off rag robe. The monk practicing the Dhutanga is not allowed to use that robe. Sometimes people build a monastery or a building and decide to offer robes to the monks who will reside there. Such robes are also not considered cast-off rag robes. So, if a monk not practicing the Dhutanga offers a robe to monks practicing the Dhutanga, he must offer it not based on seniority, but as a personal gift. This is the meaning presented here. In Vijnanamoli's translation, he misunderstood a word, and in the case of a robe offered by a monk that has been obtained at the end of the rainy season. This translation is quite wrong. The Pali word here is vasa, which can mean rain or year. The second meaning is year. It also means the number of years as a monk, a vasa. If someone asks me, "How many vasas do you have?" I would reply, "I have 41 vasas. This means I have been a monk for 41 years. When robes are distributed, they are distributed based on seniority. Suppose there are 100 monks but only 50 robes. These 50 robes are distributed to the 50 most senior monks. The distribution stops there. When they have more robes, they will distribute them to the 51st monk, and so on. This is how robes offered to the Sangha are distributed. The Pali word vasa here means the number of years as a monk, not the end of the rainy season. This is quite interesting, but also somewhat humorous. The Pali word is vasagar. Vasa can mean rain, year, or the number of years as a monk. Aga can mean end or edge. Vijnanamoli inferred that it means at the edge of the rainy season or the end of the rainy season. This is quite wrong. Here aga does not mean edge or end. Aga is something like a part or quantity, meaning the quantity of vasa. And vasa here does not mean rainy season, but the number of years as a monk. So when a monk not practicing the Dhutanga offers a robe to monks practicing the Dhutanga, he should not offer it based on their seniority. He should give the robes as a personal gift. This is the case of a robe offered by a monk not practicing the Dhutanga to monks practicing the Dhutanga. Now, if a monk not practicing the Dhutanga receives a robe from lay people who place it at his feet rather than giving it directly to him, and then that monk places it in the hands of a monk practicing the Dhutanga, this is called one-sided purity. When a robe is placed at the feet of a monk, it is called pure. When it is placed in the hands of a monk, it is not called pure. so it is pure one-sided. If lay people offer a robe directly to a monk and that monk places it at the feet of a monk practicing the Dhutanga, this is also called one-sided purity. If lay people place a robe at the feet of a monk and that monk gives it to a monk practicing the Dhutanga, by placing the robe at the feet of the monk practicing the Dhutanga, that robe is called pure both sides. A robe placed in the hands of a monk not practicing the Dhutanga and then placed in the hands of a monk practicing the Dhutanga is not considered a robe of a strict practitioner. Monks practicing the Dhutanga are divided into 3 levels: superior, intermediate, and inferior. These 3 levels are presented here. Here, the monk who collects robes only from the cemetery is of the superior level. This monk is of the superior level. This means that the monk only collects robes from the cemetery. This practice is not feasible today. It is not feasible even in our country. In ancient times, people wrapped corpses in cloth and left them in the cemetery. The corpse was neither buried nor cremated, so monks could collect such cloth from the cemetery. Thus, today, for this Dhutanga, there cannot be monks practicing at the superior level. The monk who collects robes discarded by someone with the thought, "A monk will pick it up," is of the intermediate level. This means that someone discards a robe somewhere for monks to see and pick up. If a monk practicing the Dhutanga picks up this robe, he is of the intermediate level. The monk who collects a robe placed at his feet by another monk is of the inferior level. Thus, there are 3 levels, or ranks, in each practice of the 13 Dhutanga practices. Therefore, there are 3 levels of classification for practitioners. The benefits of practicing are presented here. He truly practices in harmony with the requisites. There are 4 requisites for monks: robes, food, shelter, and medicine. They are called requisites. When a monk depends on robes collected from the cemetery and so forth, he is said to be practicing in harmony with the instructions for this requisite. He abides in the first type of noble heritage. The reference here is A27. There are 4 noble heritages: being content with whatever robes are available, being content with whatever food is available, being content with whatever shelter is available, and practicing meditation. These are for monks. These are called the 4 noble heritages. The commentator says, he abides in the first type of noble heritage, which means being content with whatever robes are available. The practice of wearing the 3 robes. The second Dhutanga practice is the practice of wearing the 3 robes. There are 3 robes designated for monks. If a monk uses only these 3 robes, he is considered to be practicing this Dhutanga. Let me show you the 3 robes. This is the underrobe, Antaravasika. This is the upper robe, Uttarasanga. It is twice the size of the underrobe. These are the 2 robes we usually wear daily. There is another robe called the Sangati and Padi. It has 2 layers. We call it the Great Robe. It has more sections or panels than the other robes. The other robe has only 5 sections or panels. We call them panels. This robe can have about 25 panels. Who makes these robes? Nowadays, lay people make and sell them. The Sangati is often used as a blanket. It has 2 layers, so in winter we use it as a blanket. The Buddha allowed the use of these 3 robes. When he wanted to permit the use of robes, the Buddha himself used these robes. According to the texts, on the coldest day of the year, probably in December, he wore just 1 robe, perhaps at night. He tried it and could bear it with 1 robe during the first watch of the night. Then he felt cold, so he added another robe. He could keep his body warm until the second watch. Then he added another robe. That kept him warm until the 3rd watch. At the end of the 3rd watch, he felt cold again, so he added another robe. Therefore, there were 4 robes in total. Monks are allowed to use these 4 robes. These 4 robes became 3 because 2 robes were combined into 1. Now we have 3 robes. A monk who uses only these 3 robes, no additional robes, no changes of robes, is called a monk practicing this Dhutanga. I have a question. If someone wants to become a monk and live a strict life, like practicing the 3 robes practice, it seems very difficult. The Buddha did not live in Alaska, a state in the USA known for its extremely cold and harsh climate. Yes, that's right. You see, I am currently wearing this extra jacket and hat. I would never use these in Myanmar. We have to adapt to the weather of the place where we live. The Buddha lived in India. India is not as cold as the United States or Alaska. We have to adjust some things, he taught. Perhaps the idea here is the minimum number of robes you can live with. The meaning here is minimalism. Some monks might have 10 or 12 sets of these 3 robes. Actually, it's not necessary to have that many. The essential need here is just 1 set of 3 robes. That's the idea. In ancient days, monks had to dye their robes themselves. When dyeing the robes, first the monk dyed the underrobe, also known as the lower robe, or the upper robe, also known as the upper garment. The underrobe means the smallest robe. After dyeing one of the 2 robes, the monk should wear it around the waist and dye the other one. This means that while dyeing the robes, one robe can be worn as the lower garment. After dyeing, the monk wears the dyed robe and dyes the other one, and so on. This is mentioned in paragraph 24. The multi-paneled robe refers to the Sangati, but he must not wear the multi-paneled robe around his waist. This robe must not be used as the underrobe, even temporarily. The Sangati should not be used as the underrobe at any time. This is to be done when staying in a village. This means in the village or near the village. But he may wash and dye both robes together if in the forest. He might not wear anything, but since he is in the forest, he can do so. However, he should sit near the robes so that if he sees a stranger, he can cover himself with the yellow robe. Why is this color used? I think this color is easily available and considered appropriate for renunciants who have left the household life. This color is actually between yellow and brown. No specific color is mentioned, but it should not be bright yellow. It should not be blue. It should be between yellow and brown. We get the dye from the bark of a tree or the heartwood of the jackfruit tree. I asked people here in the USA, where Venerable Silananda was giving this talk, if they knew what a jackfruit tree is, and they said no. The jackfruit is similar to breadfruit. The outer skin of the jackfruit has spikes, but not very sharp. It is a tropical fruit. The inner heartwood of that tree is dark brown. We take the heartwood, chop it into small pieces, and boil it. From that, we get the dye. When the cloth is dyed with that dye, it looks like the color of these robes. A monk practicing this dhutanga can have a 4th robe, or in other words, an additional piece of cloth. It is mentioned here. It is called the shoulder cloth. It is just a piece of cloth, 1 span wide, vitarato vidati, and 3 arms long, digato tihata. It is a piece of cloth to wrap around the body, to keep warm and also to absorb sweat, preventing the outer robe from getting wet with sweat. So only this 4th piece of cloth is allowed for the monk practicing this dhutanga. The practice of alms gathering. The next dhutanga practice is the practice of alms gathering. If a monk practices this, he must go for alms every day. He must not accept any meal invitations. There are 14 types of food not to be accepted. In paragraph 27, the monk practicing this alms gathering should not accept the following 14 types of food: a meal offered to the Sangha, a meal offered to specified monks. There is a monk responsible for designating monks to receive food. He may designate a specific monk to receive food at a specific layperson's house. This type of food is called food offered to a specified monk, an invited meal, a meal offered with a food ticket, distributed with food stamps, a fortnightly meal, which means once every fortnight. Some people offer food every fortnight, a upasatha day meal, which happens on full moon days, 15th, and new moon days, 29th or 30th. A meal on the first day of the fortnight, which means the day after the full moon, 16th, and the day after the new moon 1st. A meal offered to monks from afar, a meal offered to monks about to travel, a meal offered to sick monks, a meal offered to monks attending sick monks, a meal offered to a specific monastery, a specific vihara, a meal offered at the main house, the first house in the village, and a meal offered in rotation. Everyone takes turns offering food or a meal. These are the 14 types of food or meals that the monk practicing this dhutanga must not accept. He must go out for alms and receive food from the houses he visits. There are also 3 levels of this dhutanga practice. The strict monk practicing at the superior level receives food both from the front and the back. Do you understand? From the front and the back. Means, suppose the monk is standing in front of this house. If he is standing in front of this house and someone from the house at the back brings food to offer, that is called food from the back. And food from the front means food from the next house. So the monk practicing strictly receives food both from the front and the back. He hands over his bowl to the laypeople while he stands outside the gate. He stands in front of the house. People come out and say, "Please give us your bowl. We want to place food in your bowl." He hands over his bowl to them. Doing so is allowed for him, but he does not receive food by sitting and waiting for food to be brought on that day. The monk practicing at the intermediate level also receives food by sitting and waiting for food to be brought on that day, but he does not agree or promise to wait for food to be brought the next day. He does not promise to wait for the next day. The lenient monk, practicing at the inferior level, agrees or accepts food to be brought to offer the next day and the day after that. The latter two monks miss or lose the joy of independent living. Sometimes I cannot do what I want to do because I have accepted an invitation from someone and I have to be there. The meaning here is similar. The latter two monks miss or lose the joy of independent living. Perhaps there is a Dhamma talk about the noble heritage in a certain town. The superior monk says to the other two, "Friends, let us go and listen to the Dhamma." One of the other two says, "Venerable sir, a layperson has asked me to sit and wait here." And the other says, "Venerable sir, I have agreed or promised to receive food tomorrow." So both of them are at a loss, disadvantaged, or losers. Both miss the opportunity to hear the Dhamma. The remaining monk, the superior monk, goes for alms in the morning and then enjoys the taste of the Dhamma. Let us read about the benefits. Indeed, he practices in harmony with this requisite. Because of the saying, monastic life depends on the use of alms food, he abides in the second type of noble heritage. His existence is independent or not dependent on others. It is the type of requisite praised by the Blessed One as not of much value, easily obtainable, not subject to criticism. Laziness is removed. Livelihood is purified. The observance of the minor rules of the Patimokkha is perfected. These minor rules state that you must go for alms. When you go for alms, you must be mindful. He is not supported by others. He is not dependent on another person. He helps others. Conceit is abandoned. Craving for flavors is controlled. The precepts 1, about eating in groups, 2, about replacing one invitation with another, and 3, about proper conduct are not violated. Here too, the translator misunderstood a word. This passage refers to 3 rules or 3 precepts for monks. The first precept states that if a group of monks is invited, they must not go together as a group to receive food. They are allowed to go individually but not as a group. A group here means 4 monks or more. Replacing one invitation with another means accepting a later invitation. For example, someone comes to me and invites me for food. Then another person comes later and invites me for food. If I accept the second invitation and then receive food from the second person, I violate this precept. That is the meaning here. Replacing here means not accepting food from the first person, but going to receive food from the second person. That is why we have to be careful with invitations. This must be done according to the rule of accepting the first invitation. We are not allowed to favor rejecting the first invitation to accept the second. Proper conduct is not actually proper conduct. The translator misunderstood the word karita. There is a rule prohibiting monks from visiting families before or after taking food at a household. Suppose I am invited to take food at a household. Before taking food at that household, I must not visit another household. And after taking food at that household, I must not visit another household. If I want to visit, I must inform another monk, "Venerable sir, I will visit that household." If he informs another monk nearby, it is fine. If there is no monk nearby to inform, or he does not inform anyone, and he visits another household before or after taking food at the household, he violates the rule. This rule in Pali is called karita. Karita can mean proper conduct. It also means going about. Here it is used in the second sense, which is visiting. Violating these 3 rules is mentioned here: receiving food in groups, accepting a later invitation, and visiting other households before or after taking food at the invited household. If you go for alms daily, you do not have to worry about any of these 3 rules. You will not violate any of these 3 rules because you do not accept invitations. You only go for alms. Thus, there is no violation of these rules if you practice the dhutanga of daily alms gathering. The practice of alms gathering from each house. The next dhutanga practice is the practice of alms gathering from each house. This means that if a monk practices this dhutanga, he must not skip any house. Suppose he is going for alms on a street with 10 houses. He must stop at all 10 houses. He must stop at each house and not skip any to go to the next one. This is the meaning of the term alms gathering from each house. The commentator here gives some advice. First, the monk should carefully observe whether the street is clear and safe. If it is congested or unsafe, he should take another route. If there are certain houses from which he consistently does not receive food, he can regard those houses as not houses. He can skip those houses because they never offer food to him. In such cases, he can skip them. Let us look at the benefits mentioned in paragraph 33, around the 3rd or 4th line. He avoids the dangers of being dependent on a family. This statement is incorrect here. Hiyanamoli always makes this mistake. He avoids the dangers of frequently visiting families. A monk who frequently visits families is seen as a bad monk, a monk with poor conduct. But if he goes for alms, he does not have to visit them. He avoids the danger of being too familiar with families or lay people. Practicing ascetic practices or engaging in the world. Recently, the phenomenon of Venerable Tichman II, practicing the ascetic practices by walking from the south to the north, has garnered admiration from the public from all walks of life. People wait for him along the road, bowing or kneeling in the road to pay homage, offering food and drink, sometimes accompanying him for long distances. Sometimes they gather around him at resting places, whether it is a cemetery, an abandoned house, or under a tree, sitting around him to listen to his teachings or to ask questions. Notably, in Thanh, a busload of primary school students eagerly ran to see and bow to him. And for the first time, a monk gave a Dharma talk in a cemetery. Venerable Mintu is admired because he is a symbol of renunciation of greed, as he does not accept monetary offerings, only water and food before noon, and does not accept more to save for the next day. Contrary to the luxurious lifestyle of some monks and nuns, with phones, expensive cars, and Rolex watches, calling on Buddhists to donate all their assets to the temple for merit, and sending the collected money back to their parents to build houses. He is a living symbol of the time when the Buddha was still alive, with a shaved head, barefoot, wearing robes made from discarded cloth found in garbage dumps or cemeteries. He does not accept beautiful cloths donated by lay people. He does not stay in any place for more than 3 days and continues traveling like that until his death. He is a symbol of the eradication of ego by referring to himself as child to everyone, different from some young monks who are only 30 years old but call themselves teacher and address elders of 70, 80 years as child. He humbly says that he has not attained anything but only follows what the Buddha taught. In the past, the patriarchs only preached after attaining enlightenment. Today, due to the need for spreading the Dharma, temples organize training classes for young preachers, whose monastic life is not very long, so their words, though eloquent, do not match their actions, damaging the value of Buddhism and tarnishing the reputation of genuine practitioners. He is a symbol of the eradication of delusion. While today there are countless delusions captivating people, such as jewelry, cosmetics, clothes, conveniences, vehicles, music, drugs, talent shows, beauty contests, with children as young as 5 or 3 years old knowing how to sing and dance on stage. The enthusiastic respect of the public leads to 2 consequences and shows us that this is a revival image of Buddhism deeply rooted in the hearts of the public, which is the spiritual and moral foundation of the nation for nearly 2,000 years. This is a very encouraging sign. This is the result and effort of many monks and nuns who have tirelessly practiced for at least half a century. The explosion of the media industry and the explosion of Dharma talks in temples or on forums have brought the teachings of the Buddha to the homes of the people. In the hectic and stressful life of the globalization era and the 5th scientific and technological revolution, people have begun to feel the need for a Buddha in their hearts or homes. When seeing Venerable Mentue, the public is reminded of the image of the Buddha of old. However, the overly enthusiastic praise of the public leads to the notion that only Venerable Mentue is practicing the right Dharma, while the tens of thousands of monks and nuns in temples, monasteries, and nunneries are not practicing the right Dharma, not the living image of the Buddha and his great disciples when the Buddha was alive. The image of the current monks and nuns is being diminished in the eyes of the public. As Buddhists concerned about the Dharma and the future of the nation, how should we think? Is practicing like Venerable Mentue the right Dharma, and should we practice like that? Indeed, practicing like Venerable Mentue is the right Dharma, but it is not the only practice. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha taught Subhuti that the Dharma of the thus come one has no high or low, meaning that any Dharma practice is acceptable depending on the practitioner's capabilities and commitments. In the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, the Buddha taught Bodhisattva universal enlightenment that if someone says that I have eliminated all afflictions, the body and mind are completely empty, there is no, let alone the illusory realm of the senses, all are silent to seek perfect enlightenment. But the nature of perfect enlightenment is not the aspect of silence, so it is called a disease. Then the Buddha taught Bodhisattva perfect enlightenment. Those beings with the full potential for Mahayana, whether the Buddha is present or after his extinction, whether during the era of the Dharma's demise who want to practice or reside in a monastery, guiding disciples, then should accordingly reflect as I have said. The Buddha's words to universal enlightenment Bodhisattva in the above passage are as follows. Even though manifesting in worldly engagements, performing difficult tasks, but always keeping the mind pure, appearing to have faults to praise pure conduct, without letting beings fall into places without precepts or proper conduct. Venerable Mentue follows the practice of seclusion, not accepting disciples or lay people, living alone, without a sangha, practicing austerity, to eradicate afflictions similar to the practice of the Arahats. However, there are thousands of monks and nuns who are abiding temples, accepting disciples, and serving the public, acting as engaged bodhisattvas to always act in harmony for the benefit of all beings. Practicing the ascetic practices means not engaging with the world, so there are few or no afflictions. Although it is an austere practice, it is easier. Whereas engaging with the world, being close to the mud, makes it easy to be tainted by the mud, and it is more difficult and prone to falling. Therefore, monks and nuns who reside in monasteries, accept disciples, teach, and work for the benefit of all beings, without letting their minds be tainted by the mud. As the sixth patriarch said, "Where is there any dust to be attracted to?" These are indeed holy monks. Therefore, we cannot underestimate the genuine practitioners in temples, monasteries, and nunneries. Imagine about 30,000 monks and nuns in the country, and thousands of monks and nuns overseas leaving temples and monasteries to become deserted, practicing the ascetic practices to follow the right Dharma and be admired by the public. What would become of Buddhism? In my opinion, Buddhism would be destroyed. According to historical researchers, Buddhism declined in India because after the Buddha's extinction, his disciples retreated to caves and forests to practice and did not establish a strong Buddhist community in large cities. Therefore, Buddhism had no influence or strength to impact the government and the survival of the country. The establishment of a Sangha and Buddhist communities is very important. Temples gather lay Buddhists, serve as places for practice and activities for the benefit of all beings like the Vulan festival, wedding ceremonies, prayers for family peace, and memorial services for the deceased, and raising orphans along with organizing major festivals to pray for national peace. Imagine thousands of monks and nuns wandering the country, sleeping in forests, cemeteries, mounds, begging for food every day. It would not be a beautiful sanitary image and would cause difficulties for the people's lives. With such individual lives without a Sangha, how could they organize world Buddhist conferences to discuss contemporary issues like climate change, violence, war, or excessive material pursuit? Without cohesion and organization, how could there be the Vesak festival on the Buddha's birthday with the participation of Buddhist organizations worldwide and the United Nations and national leaders of Buddhist countries? Buddhism has gone through over 2,600 years. The essence of Buddhism remains the same, but the practice must adapt to the times according to the teaching, adapt to conditions but remain unchanged. Theravada practice differs slightly from Mahayana and Vajrayana, but the heart of all is the same one Dharma nature. All are children of the Buddha and all will become Buddhas. With the level of civilization, science, and logical thinking, Americans and Europeans do not value ascetic or self-mortification practices which have existed in their religion for thousands of years. They value an ordinary practitioner, but with excellent conduct and wisdom, especially compassion and tolerance. Therefore, Zen practice and now Vajrayana have developed strongly in the Western world. If the image and lifestyle of Venerable Men too were spread in Western countries, they would wonder, why practice self-mortification like that? Is it not possible to attain enlightenment and liberation in monasteries? Buddhism is admired worldwide not because of ascetic practices, but as a religion of wisdom, peace, tolerance, equality, and environmental protection. Therefore, Vietnamese Buddhists should not, out of respect for Venerable Men too, underestimate the many monks and nuns in and outside the country who have been practicing genuinely, working to alleviate suffering, saving beings, and maintaining the spiritual and moral foundation for the nation for many years. Personally, I deeply respect Venerable Men too and his practice, but it is not the only practice. The Buddha taught 84,000 Dharma doors for monks and nuns according to their capacities and vows. Currently, there is a Chinese monk spreading the Dharma in Africa. He has vowed that after he passes away, he will be reborn in Africa to continue spreading the Dharma to beings on this continent. Is this not a bodhisattva entering the challenging mundane world to teach beings as taught by the Buddha in the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment without needing to practice the ascetic practices? Venerable Men too is a fragrant flower in the garden of Buddhism, but there are many other precious flowers like Patriarch Bodhidharma, then the sixth Patriarch, Emperor Tran Nhan Tong, Bodhisattva Quang Duc, and many holy monks and Zen masters of China, Vietnam, Japan, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama of today. I bow to all. This world is a world of relative duality and cannot be absolute. Only the mind becomes a Buddha while the material world remains as it is. Before the Buddha was born, birds ate worms. When the Buddha attained enlightenment and turned the Dharma wheel, birds still ate worms. And after the Buddha's extinction, birds still eat worms to this day. Even though Prince Siddhartha became a Buddha, he could not change this world. That is the law of impermanence in birth, old age, sickness, death. When hungry, the Buddha still had to eat. Therefore, the correct and mainstream path is the middle way, living a normal life but strictly observing precepts and rejoicing in the Dharma, as taught by Emperor Tran Nhan Tong. Live in the world but delight in the way, placing compassion above all. For the Buddha to reappear, we must wait a few thousand more years.